Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Nobody Is Shiftier, because in fact, nobody is shiftier than the Shifty Hippo. Whew, where to start today, guys? So, I am actually currently dog sitting. I am feeling it for all the people that are parents right now. I'm feeling it for all you puppy parents, as I currently have one of them trying to get under the desk in which I am recording and tangling herself up in my microphone. So this could be exciting right off the bat. Yeah, there we go. All right, we're out of there. And you might see the other ones laying on the couch. So clearly, the hands are full here in the Shifty Hippo household. And again, I am feeling it for all the parents out there. One thing that I've come to find is sleep is definitely limited at this point. I actually slept best last night by getting up late today. Um I thought that they were going to just wake me up at, 6:37 like they have every other day, but that's actually just been apparently because my alarm's been going off. If I would have known that, I would have been sleeping in a little bit more all these other days, but I did have work earlier on those days. So it wasn't as big of a deal for me. However, today, I mean, last night I didn't go to bed till like 2:30. I just couldn't fall asleep. When I woke up, it was 10. I was like, whoa. And I remember that Michelle had come in. She had told me, hey, I'm going to do what I can with the one that's on the couch because the one that's on the couch, well, she's easy. She just kind of does what you tell her to do. And that part's nice. The one that just got on the couch behind me here, she likes this is the first time she's actually been downstairs. Pretty much since we got here. She's basically come here, gone straight under my bed upstairs, which I think that's more of a I have an AC thing than a love for me thing. I think it's just because my room's the cold one. And she just stays under the bed. The only thing that you can do to get her out of that bed, and I use that word cautiously because they love that word, that OUT word. And that's the only thing I can do to actually get that one to come away from under the bed. We're gonna flip it around here. Right now, they're both hanging out in the background. So if you hear dogs doing dog stuff, I'm sorry. I have no fix for that. I have not developed a method because this is the first time that I have recorded with these two here. Currently, they're psyched about what I think is a UPS truck that just pulled up. Apparently, they're not really barkers, which is a win. They might whine a little. And the bigger one that's a little bit closer to me on the couch here for those watching on the video broadcast, well, she's a howler. She is part beagle. So she has a big thing for having a toy and at the same time howling. Not a problem for me. I'll take it. They're really good dogs, but damn, I am tired. And just before these guys showed up here, I was at my sister's for 4 days watching her two dogs and two cats. Now, those guys are kind of a blast for me because, I mean, granted, these guys are too. But those dogs and cats I've known for, I mean, their whole lives. They're easy. And I get in there and all they want to do is they just, wherever I am, they just want to be with me. The only problem with them is that they will wake me up at 5 to go eat and to the doors that are not inside. We're really going to have to finagle around this word because I promise you, if I say it too many times, they're just going to realize he's doing a thing and we need to capitalize. So, feeling it for all the parents out there, feeling it for all the dog, puppy, and daddy, or oh my God, puppy mommies and daddies out there. That's what I was going for. Lack of sleep. Sorry. Don't know what to tell you. So we're going to move over to sports now, where at the end of the show, what we're going to do today is we're going to go through, as I told you last week, top 10 NFL teams of all time. This was fun for me. This was a total blast, and I'm going to save it for the end. But what I did is I spent a lot of time here. I broke down a little bit of film study, but not a whole ton. I'm not going to be bringing you a whole ton of film study per se. It was just to remind me of a lot of these teams because most of them I had seen on some type of taping. I can tell you that the number 10 team, I didn't really ever watch much on what their tape was, mostly because I thought that the team that they played in the Super Bowl was more interesting. And then I really looked through and I was like, wait a minute. As I'm compiling the statistics for what that team did, I was like, you know what? I have to say that this will make the list, but it does sneak in at 10. We'll get there later. We're going to start today with the NBA. And there's incredibly low movement going on in the NBA. There is like no new news. It's terrible. So here's what I bring to you from the NBA's perspective. There's a little bit of reporting going on now that if Steve Nash were to not be the coach of the Brooklyn Nets, that maybe Kevin Durant would stay. I don't think that that is something that is coming from the Kevin Durant camp. I don't know where that's coming from, because the only reason that that benefits from Brooklyn leaking it is maybe they just didn't think Steve Nash could handle these guys. And they think that there's a legitimate chance that maybe KD ends up being there next year, and they're going to try to do something to make him happy, so we don't just run into this 2 weeks into the season. I I don't think it's real. Honestly, I think this is just total bullshit. Kevin Durant wants to be out of there. Kyrie Irving wants to be out of there. And now I mention this for any of you who listen to Jacked and Canned also. I mentioned this last week. If they are not moved, I'm going to start knocking on doors. All right? KD not out the building, I'm knocking on doors. Where's he going? I'm ready for these guys to move. If they're not moved, I'm knocking on doors. I started with the neighbor. Just pointed at him, told him to shut the fuck up. That's a door knocked on. What else? What else am I going to do? Well, I'm going to slowly march my way to Brooklyn, just knocking on doors. Eventually, I'm going to find the Brooklyn Nets office, and I will actually probably just do the same thing when they open the door, because I kind of have one prepared thing. Please, Brooklyn, move these guys. I need to know where they're going to be. I got to get my NBA 2K game going. I got to get everything like up in arms. Everything's got to be ready to go. And it can't just be like, oh, by season start, because guess what? I'm about to win another title on NBA 2K19 because, well, I'm waiting for 2K22 to come out before I get a new one. But there's really no point in getting a newer one at this point. So I need these guys to be there, not before that game comes out, but I'm at the conference championships. Like, I'm going to be done with this, and well, probably definitely not at the end of this week, because I still got these two for a little bit, but end of next week, this season's going to be done. I need these guys to be moved. It's the only logical explanation. There's nothing else that can be done. They need to move, make it happen. The other thing in the NBA that I was curious about, and I actually didn't look this up because I want to come to you as blindly as this idea came to me. Do the Lakers even have a roster right now? And like, I'm thinking about what the team is comprised of, and I know that LeBron's there, and I know that Anthony Davis is there. I know that Scottie Pippen Jr. is a part of the team, and I want to say that there was maybe it was Kendrick Nunn. There's somebody else that's part of the roster, but they didn't re-sign Melo. They didn't re-sign Dwight. Malik Monk's gone. I don't know who else is on the team. And I'm actually wondering, do they even have a like half full roster? Are they just going to have like a bunch of unsigned free agents that just come in? Like 6 of them? Because I didn't actually look to see how many players the Lakers have physically on their roster. I don't know. For all I know, maybe they actually have 12 people and they're just looking to fill 3 more spots, or maybe they have 5 players and they actually just need like 10 more. I mean, I know that they put together a summer league team, but I don't, is that going to be the team? The summer league team and LeBron and AD? I mean, I wanted them to get younger, but I don't know that I wanted it to just be LeBron and AD that are over the age of, 20. I don't know what's going on there, but I got to hear something from them, or else, I mean, not that I had really championship aspirations for the Lakers this year, but it can't, I mean, it can't be that young, right? There's got to be something going on. I know they're holding out hope for the Kyrie Irving thing too, and I am as well. Granted, even with Kyrie, I have very you would say comparative to probably a lot of other opinion givers in this industry. My expectations are still relatively low, even if Kyrie Irving is there. My expectation is that they could make the playoffs just because those three guys are that kind of good. But I don't think that's by any means a championship team. Like when I say could make the playoffs, I mean like all three of them have to play 60 plus games and probably closer to 70. At least two of the three have to play right around 70. One of them can play 60. But like if Kyrie Irving plays 30 games again, if Anthony Davis plays 40 and LeBron plays, I don't know, 55, 60, that's not even close to a championship team. That might also be a non-playoff team, especially considering that the rest of this roster apparently is the summer league team, because I don't know who else they have. And again, I did not look this up intentionally because I want you guys to know how this thought was hitting me. And I didn't want to come in here with new information at the time that I brought this opinion to the table, because I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, well, what if I go on there and I find out that, somehow I just didn't hear about four signings? Granted, if they did sign like four guys, I don't know who they are probably, because it never came across my headlines. So, as we move out of the NBA, we will immediately move into the NFL. So, we're going to talk a little bit here about the Hall of Fame class that was inducted for 2022. Tony Baselli, Cliff Branch, Leroy Butler, Art McNally, Sam Mills, Richard Seymour, Dick Vermeil, and Bryant Young. So, Tony Baselli, obviously great left tackle for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I know that he didn't have the longest of careers. That man could play. Like, I know that Jacksonville wasn't this monstrous team, although, keep in mind that this team at one point, I believe super early in Baselli's career, I don't remember exactly how early, might have even been a rookie year kind of thing. They took out the end of Dan Marino by beating him 62-7 in a playoff game. It's actually one of the first non-Super Bowl, actually it might be the first non-Super Bowl game that I remember, is watching Dan Marino. My dad was like, we got to watch this. This is Marino's last run. Let's see it. He's going to retire after this game. And then Jacksonville just wiped the floor with him. Looking at him like, the time I'm like, God, it's 6, 7. Like, Dad, I don't think Dan Marino's any good. Obviously looking back on it, Dan Marino is phenomenal, as we talked about last week on top 10 quarterbacks of all time list. So we look at what that Jacksonville team was at that moment. That was pretty cool. And then it started going downhill. Well, Mark Brunell was fine. Jimmy Smith, Fred Taylor, very, very good. But if I'm not mistaken, Jimmy Smith didn't play entirely that long after that. Keenan McCardell was there. He ended up going to Tampa, winning the Super Bowl. To be honest with you, I actually don't know a whole lot of other Jags from even that team. I know Tony Baselli, Mark Brunell, Fred Taylor, and Jimmy Smith, and Keenan McCardell. I think that's all I remember of that team. They very well may have had other good players, and probably guys that I know, and I just didn't realize they were part of that team. But Tony Baselli, I mean, yeah, Mark Brunell was a lefty, so I guess Tony Baselli was, maybe great left tackle that didn't need to be a great left tackle. I'm pretty sure it still mattered. I think if you asked Mark Brunell, he would say it absolutely mattered. Tony Baselli, absolute Hall of Famer. I'm actually a little bit surprised it took this long. Now, I'll be honest with you. I didn't do the research on all these guys. Cliff Branch, wide receiver, rings a bell. I couldn't tell you who he even played for. That one does not ring a bell to me. And, part of that's probably showing a little bit of my youth, that, whatever I have left of it. Cliff Branch, I'm not really super familiar with. And I bet if I just looked up who he was, I'd probably go, oh, yeah. But I didn't take that time. Congrats, Cliff Branch. Leroy Butler, safety for the Green Bay Packers. I remember him. Oh, oh, he was fun, man. That guy, he had the perfect. I wouldn't call him necessarily a ball hawk, but he had a great combination of being a mixture of the ball hawk type as well as being somebody that you didn't want to see over the middle. Your prototypical perfect 90s safety. That was what Leroy Butler was. And he had very good hands for a safety, as I recall, which even though I wouldn't necessarily, again, I wouldn't call him a ball hawk. I wouldn't say he was Ed Reed, but Leroy Butler, if the ball was near him, it was going to likely end up in his hands. And like I said, you didn't want to see Leroy Butler over the middle. I'm telling you that right now. Wasn't quite Steve Atwater, just to give preference to anybody of that era. You know what I'm talking about. Steve Atwater, you didn't want to see him. He's probably the guy you wanted to see least over the middle as far as the safety position is concerned in the 90s. Official Art McNally. So he was an official of sorts. I don't know if they say official just that he was a ref of any kind or if he was specifically the official. I don't know how that's going in as, but either way, I'm not 100% sure who that is. There's certain refs that you can tell me a name and I'm like, oh yeah, I know that guy. Like you say Ed Hockley and I'm like, yep, I got it. Guns. I think his son's reffing now too, if I'm not mistaken. Also has guns. Linebacker Sam Mills. Again, this is one that isn't ringing a bell to me. However, it may just be part of a defense that I'm familiar with. And granted, sometimes, you hear the leading name and that's what sticks with you. And Sam Mills, I'm sure he was a great linebacker. He's in the Hall of Fame. I'm just unfamiliar with him. Defensive end Richard Seymour. I know him. That guy. Oh, I'll be honest. I wasn't sure if Richard Seymour was a Hall of Famer. I knew he was very good for a very long time, but I didn't know that he necessarily passed the precipice of what would be now considered that fine line of Hall of Fame or not Hall of Fame. Well, he has passed through. I feel like that sounds morbid. But Richard Seymour has made it into the Hall of Fame, obviously defensive end with the New England Patriots for a very long time. I believe he finished out his career in Oakland, if I'm not mistaken. Richard Seymour was the defensive front of those championship New England Patriots. It was Richard Seymour and Vince Wilfork. Then you could pretty much have whatever other guy on the end, and it didn't matter. You didn't really need the third guy because keep in mind, they ran a 3-4 defense. So you typically had Vince Wilfork and Richard Seymour on the line. Then you'd have whatever other defensive lineman, and you'd usually have a blitzing linebacker of sorts, whether it be Mike Vrabel, Teddy Bruschi. Bruschi wasn't much of a blitzer, but Vrabel could get in there. They had Willie McGinnis. He was somebody that came off the edge a lot. So we got to see a lot of good Richard Seymour, and also Richard Seymour was a part of, I believe, Tom Brady's first 3 championships. I think he was there for all 3 of them at the start. I say that now, and Brady's got, 7? It's like, he was there for the first 3. He was there for all of them. Just the first 3. That whole, weird 12-year gap where the Pats didn't win a Super Bowl, and then all of a sudden we're the best team in football again for 5 years. Yeah. He wasn't there for after all that. Defensive lineman Bryant Young. He was another guy that I honestly I think of him and I remember he was a very good defensive lineman, but I didn't think of him as a Hall of Famer. I think of him as somebody that got the occasional sack, stuffed up the run pretty well, and did it for a long time. I don't know that I would have put him in the Hall of Fame. That's not a slight on him. I never viewed him as a Hall of Fame type player. That one was the one that kind of surprised me out of this because again, Cliff Branch and Sam Mills, I'm just unfamiliar with them, so I don't want to sit here and tell you what I think of them. Brian Young, I'm pretty damn familiar with. He was very good for a very long time. Okay. Hall of Fame? Man, all right. He's in there. I mean, still congrats. I'm not going to take it away from any of these guys. Coach Dick Vermeil. I'm going to take a little sip of beer because we got to talk a little bit about Dick Vermeil. Dick Vermeil had two of the most electric offenses that I have ever seen in football. And the first one that everybody's going to go to is the 99 Rams. And really what that Rams offense was for about a 3-4 year period. But there was another one too. And I'm going to do this a little bit chronologically. So if you don't know who Dick Vermeil is, let me start with the 99 Rams, the greatest show on turf. They go into that season with Trent Green as their starting quarterback. And he goes down, I believe it was week 1, if I'm not mistaken. I believe it was week 1. It may have been just a couple of weeks into the season, but I think it was the first week. Trent Green goes out. He's going to be out all year. And in comes Kurt Warner, guy that was famously at this point bagging groceries just a little bit before this. He had played in the CFL and the AFL, I believe. Or maybe it was just the AFL. Maybe he was never in the CFL. I don't remember. Kurt Warner didn't have really anything to an NFL resume. And Dick Vermeil said, hey, we're going to ride it out with Kurt. He's our quarterback. Well, it turns out Kurt Warner was one hell of a quarterback. I believe he got his own gold jacket recently. So we saw Kurt Warner. We know Kurt Warner. We know the story of Kurt Warner. There was recently a movie made about Kurt Warner. They also had Marshall Faulk. For any of you that don't know Marshall Faulk, YouTube it because he's actually really fun to watch. That dude made people miss. Marshall Faulk was fun, and he was also one of the rare backs in this era, because keep in mind, not all the running backs did this back then. He could run the ball and come out of the backfield to be a receiver. Mind blown, right? If you can't do that today, you can't be in the NFL. But Marshall Faulk, he did both incredibly well. Marshall Faulk was one of the best running backs of that era. And that was actually what this offense was supposed to be predicated on, was Marshall Faulk, Marshall Faulk, Marshall Faulk. Well, it turned out that once Kurt Warner got heated up, well, where's he going to go with the ball? Well, we got this guy, Isaac Bruce, who's been here for a while. Isaac Bruce. Oh my God. Bring me back. Isaac Bruce was already an established name, but what you didn't realize is that you were going to have a second receiver, young and upcoming. Might remember he also changed his number throughout the course of his career. Kind of at random. By the way, he only switched it once. Torrey Holt. Yes, for those of you who know who I'm speaking of when I say Torrey Holt, most of you should, because Torrey Holt's a phenomenal receiver as well. Torrey Holt was the young kid on the roster. We didn't know much about Torrey Holt, and then he burst onto the scene, not quite like Randy Moss did in 98 with the Vikings, but he burst on nonetheless. Really helped out, especially when you're already talking about an established guy with Isaac Bruce on the one end. And I'm just going to mention a third receiver here because I seem to remember some very significant catches from this man, Ricky Proll. Now, you probably don't know who I'm talking about when I mention Ricky Proll. He spent his time there. I don't know what he did before the 99 Rams, but he was on that 99 Rams roster, and I remember him catching, I believe it was the only touchdown of the NFC Championship game that year, where it was the St. Louis at the time Rams and the Tampa Bay Bucks. And Ricky Proll was the one who caught the big one in a very low scoring game, which was nuts because that Rams offense was going so crazy offensively. They were just putting up points and points and points and points. They could launch like a 45 on you for just stepping onto the field. And this game, if I'm not mistaken, I think it ended 13-6. Like that's what I got in my head. I think it was 13-6, and there was a safety in there somewhere, and I think there was a missed extra. Like it wasn't your traditional 13-6. Maybe it was 11-6 even. There was something weird about the score. I remember that, and there was also then a rule implemented about the catch rule after that game because Bert Emanuel, for those of you who were Bucs fans back then, you might remember Bert Emanuel had a catch that he had full possession of, but the ball just touched the ground as he brought it in. And at the time, that was an incomplete pass. But you knew looking at that, well, I mean, he caught the ball. It just happened to touch the ground. Well, that's where you started getting that exact rule from. You still see it today. Now, when the ball hits the ground, when somebody's catching it, they say, "Does the ball move?" Well, it's because of Bird Emanuel's catch. Very fun game. Yeah, I know it sounds boring by the score I gave you. I'm telling you, I love that game. Now, Dick Vermeil goes on to win a Super Bowl there, keeps this offense going. Granted, the 2000 season, I think, was a little bit of a disappointment. I'm not even sure if they made the playoffs. I don't remember how that season went. All I know is that they were not there at the end because we got to see the Giants and the Ravens absolutely smacked them in Ray Lewis's first Super Bowl. Don't forget that Ray Lewis had one before that 2012 season, where it was his last season, and everybody made such a big deal about it being Ray Lewis's year. Just keep in mind, he did win a Super Bowl early on in his career as well. Well, after 2001, there was a little bit of a quarterback controversy there. All of a sudden, Kurt Warner started looking like he was coming down, or maybe it was after the 02 season. Mark Bulger steps in, and all of a sudden, everybody's into Mark Bulger. Kurt Warner ends up going to the Giants, looks terrible there, and then somehow resurrects himself in Arizona to put together his second great career. Dick Vermeil, in the meantime, heads over to Kansas City. Now, I don't think a lot of people are going to remember these teams. And I think I talked about it last week too. He goes over to Kansas City and he brings over with him, Trent Green, his starting quarterback for the year of the 99 Rams. If it wasn't for an injury, it would have been Trent Green running that team. He says, you know what? I think Trent Green still got it. He heads over there to Kansas City, and it's Trent Green slinging it. It's Priest Holmes. For those of you who don't know Priest Holmes, go Google him. Also a fun watch. Running backs actually back at this day were way funner to watch. Right now, if you're not watching like basically Derrick Henry, you're really not getting the full running back experience. Derrick Henry's an amazing running back. Everybody else, there's good ones. Jonathan Taylor's awesome. None of these guys were doing the stuff that half the running backs in the early 2000s and late 90s were doing. I'm telling you, Google it, YouTube it, you'll find it out. So Priest Holmes is running the ball. Eddie Kenninson, Johnny Morton catching the ball. You might remember the human highlight reel of football. We're talking about Dante Hall. There was a 2-year period in which Dante Hall was the best returner of kicks and punts in NFL history. For anybody that wants to tell me it's Devin Hester, yes, career, absolutely, Devin Hester. But you want to tell me for a 2-year span, nobody beats Dante Hall. Nobody. Dante Hall for 2 years, every time that he caught a punt or a kick, you were like, okay, well, we just gave him 7. The dude just he had such a style about him. You remember how Barry Sanders ran the ball and oftentimes he would run backwards before he ran forwards? That was Dante Hall. The guy was just looping around the field, and sometimes it didn't work out. Sometimes, hey, he just lost 11 yards on a punt return. Then a lot of times, he was in the end zone doing the Dante Hall thing. He was doing a thing with Gatorade back then. I remember that. Dante Hall was fun. That offense altogether, points. And I remember every time that they played the Indianapolis Colts of that era, and it was Peyton Manning, Trent Green, you had Edgerrin James versus Priest Holmes. Yeah, Marvin Harrison and Reggie Wayne were better than Eddie Kenninson and Johnny Morton, although Johnny Morton, I think, was only there for the beginning of that. I don't think he was there very long after. Also, keep in mind, I totally forgot to mention this name. Tony Gonzalez was a part of that. Before that whole time that he was with Matt Ryan in Atlanta, yeah, he had a whole another great part of his career in Kansas City with Trent Green. Oh, it was fun. God, I miss there's parts of those offenses that I really miss today. All right, guys, the preseason has begun. Deshaun Watson is supposed to begin the preseason for Cleveland. That's going to be a zoo. Not really going to talk much about it. Just wanted to make note of it because it's in the news. So we're going to move on from that. But, it's not so much about football being back yet because, frankly, to me, it's still not back, but it's the countdown. We're getting close, man. Like football's just around the corner. Preseason signifies to me we have a clock going on when this season begins, and it's coming. We got fantasy leagues, which for the first time in years, probably close to a decade, I'll be joining one with the guys from Breaking Down the Tape here, as well as with my buddy from Jacked and Can, John. We're all going to be in a league together. I believe John is also trying to start a fan league for Jacked and Can. So anybody that's a fan of Jacked and Canned, I think John's going to just give an open invite for that, or probably already has. John does that. I'm excited for that, honestly, just because I know it's going to be a lot of shit talking. Hector's going to say what he said, and it's going to be a great time. I'm just excited for the camaraderie of it because, frankly, I've never really given a shit about fantasy football. That's why I haven't played it in so long. To me, it's just, it's so much. Who knows? Like you draft a guy first round, he goes down with an injury in week one. It's like, well, it's not that I drafted poorly. It's that, my running back for the whole year, like I took Derrick Henry and he just went down with a torn ACL. It's, it's, it's frustrating. I don't really find fantasy to be that fun. And plus, also half the time, I don't even want to take the time to set my lineup. So if I got 4 guys on a bye week, I got 4 guys on a bye week. What are you going to do? What I am excited for, there's going to be spreads. There's going to be over-unders. There's going to be money lines. There is money to win out there, ladies and gentlemen. So that's what I get excited for. All right, what are the picks going to be? I have not looked at the week 1 lineup yet. Outside of the Bills, Rams, I don't know who else is playing. I don't even know who the Seahawks are playing. Oh, yeah, we played Denver. Never mind. I know 2 games. Haven't looked at a spread yet. I'm waiting. I'm waiting until the week of. Not getting in there early, not risking a week 3 preseason injury, not risking an unhappy player that we didn't realize was unhappy, not realizing that the Kyler Murray thing is going to blow up way worse than it is, and he's not there, and all of a sudden I've got $40 on Arizona minus 6.5, and they're not going to cover now. I'm not putting up with any of it. I will wait till the week of the season. I will probably start placing, I'll place something in for the Bills-Rams game just because I'm so excited for it to be back, regardless if I even know what's going to happen in that game, because granted, I will admit, I am solid at picking these games, but I am not great. I would not sit here and tell you that I'm a Hall of Fame level picker. I just love doing it. Like I don't know why everybody has to be out here and they have to be right all the time. Sometimes it's just fun to gamble. Sometimes it's just fun to give an opinion. It doesn't have to be the right one. You can just give an opinion. It's fun. You can just think that this team's going to win. Put down $5 on it. I actually don't bet that. Like my actual betting, I throw down like $5 on like 5 games a week. So I'm spending like $25. Occasionally I get a great feeling on one and I'll dump out a 20. I don't sit here and throw down hundreds of dollars. Got to bet within your means. For anybody that's out there gambling, do it within your means. Damn it. Got the Pick'em League started up. Ooh, the Pick'em League. I'm excited about the Pick'em League. So the Pick'em League, with this one, it's me and a whole bunch of my friends, like my personal buddies. We get together and we start up the Pick'em League, and it's just picking the winners. Last year wasn't my best at this, by the way. Usually I pick just who's going to win the game at close to like somewhere between 75 and 80%. Last year, I think at the end of the year, I got on a hot streak and I pushed it to like 71 or 72, but it wasn't great. And I ended up getting beaten that league. So I'm excited for this one to start up, and for, again, any Jacked and Can followers. John is joining my Pick'em League this year. I'm very excited about that. I just can't wait to pick games, man. Whether it be betting, whether it be this Pick'em League, I'm excited for all of it. I think we're ready now. After a nice sip of the beer, we're going to talk about the top 10 teams in NFL history before we get out of here on. Oh, I almost called this Jacked and Canned. This is not Jacked and Canned. This is Nobody Is Shiftier, because nobody is shiftier than the Shifty Hippo, damn it. Telling you, again, to the parents out there, I don't know how you keep it together. I can't even remember the name of my own damn shows. All right, guys. Top 10 NFL teams of all time. Number 10. Oh, we don't want to start with number 10. We've got some OLIs. We got some outside looking in, baby. We got the 98 Minnesota Vikings outside looking in. They didn't even make it to the Super Bowl, but for any of you who didn't get to watch that team, that was one of the best offenses. If you just told me top 10 offenses of all time, they would be on that list. They would 100% be on that list. Randall Cunningham, Robert Smith, Randy Moss, Chris Carter, those guys were bombing on the rest of the NFL. And it's very unfortunate that they ended up not making the Super Bowl because of a missed field goal from, I believe it was Gary Anderson. If I think I got that right. I know it was one of those Andersons, and they don't often miss kicks, but I'm pretty sure it was Gary. He goes ahead and misses actually what was a relatively makeable field goal as well. And that sends the Atlanta Falcons to the Super Bowl. And for those of you who don't remember that Super Bowl, they got absolutely smoked by John Elway and the Broncos. Very disappointing. I was so excited for that Super Bowl, and all of a sudden it's like a 25-point game at halftime. I'm like, okay, never mind. I guess this isn't the year. If it was the Vikings, that would have been one hell of a Super Bowl. John Elway and Randall Cunningham going back and forth with that offense that Minnesota had. And yeah, Elway and the Broncos had an offense too. Elway, Terrell Davis, Rod Smith, Ed McCaffrey, Christian McCaffrey's father. That was a fun team. Oh, and Shannon Sharp. He was there too. I don't know why I'm leaving out tight ends. For some reason, I guess they don't matter today for me. Oh, well, I guess I just talked about my second OLI. It was the 98 Broncos. Yeah, as we continue with that, obviously that was Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan's father, as the coach, bringing in the beginning of those Shanahan run schemes that you see with the zone run scheme. Rod Smith, very good receiver. Ed McCaffrey had the best hands in the NFL. You can't tell me otherwise. The guy, it seemed like he just had glue on his hands. Actually, you know what? There's one receiver that I would say absolutely had better hands than Ed McCaffrey, and that was Musim Muhammad. If you guys don't remember him, he was on those early 2000 Panther teams. Anything that was thrown in his general direction ended up in his hand. It was ridiculous. He was a possession receiver for a reason. Same with Ed McCaffrey, possession receiver. Shannon Sharp, obviously, the guy that you see on FS1. I don't remember what the show is called, but he's the guy sitting across from Skip Bayless. They talk sports. They yell at each other. He does that now. Once upon a time, Hall of Fame tight end. That's what he was. Terrell Davis, wish he could have stayed in the league a little bit longer, except that well, it turns out that it wasn't great for me personally as a Seahawk guy, because Terrell Davis just ran all over the Seahawks twice a year. I think if you look at his top 5 career games, I think 2 or 3 of them came against Seattle. So, for that, I was happy that he retired when he did, but I think he still had more juice in the tank, and I hate to see guys go out too early. Another outside looking in, the 69 Minnesota Vikings. Fran Tarkenton and the Purple People Eaters. Fran Tarkenton, if you guys haven't gotten to see him, I'm not telling you got to YouTube him. I just said the year 1969. Footage won't be great. Might bore some of you. Fran Tarkenton was one of the first incredibly mobile quarterbacks that could also throw the ball in the NFL. the guy could move and could throw. So, yeah, his passing stats probably not going to be overwhelming if you look him up. But he ran the ball a fair amount, and he also was somebody that was able to utilize his legs to keep the pocket open for a little bit longer. And, the league wasn't as much about passing back then, but Fran Tarkenton was one of the first quarterbacks where you start looking and you're like, you might want him to drop back occasionally. All right, number 10, 1991 Washington at the time Redskins. 30.3 points per game, 14 points against a game. It's pretty damn impressive. So here's why I mentioned earlier that I was thinking about the team they played in the Super Bowl. I was actually considering putting one of the Bills teams from 90 to 93, I think it was, that they made it to 4 consecutive Super Bowls, and they lost all 4. With that said, I still think that those Bills teams were fun to watch. And I can talk about those Bills teams another time. We're here to talk about this Redskins team. So Mark Rippon was the quarterback, which actually did surprise me. I knew that he was there for one of these seasons, but I didn't think that it was this season. I thought this would have been a Theismann year. So Mark Rippon was the quarterback, threw for a little over 3,500 yards, 28 touchdowns, 11 picks. Ernest Biner was running the ball for a little over 1,000 yards, which again, I know both that quarterback and that running back, and I were aware that they were part of these Redskin teams, but I didn't realize they comprised a season that ended up being 30.3 points per game. You might remember leading receiver Art Monk as well, who had over 1,000 yards. Art Monk, Hall of Fame wide receiver. Charles Mann led the team in sacks with 11 and a half, which Charles Mann was somebody that you didn't want to mess around with pretty much throughout the entirety of his career. So, I mean, there weren't a whole lot of gripping names to me when I looked at the defense, but I think that's probably more so ignorance on my end than anything else. But they only allowed 14 points per game, which is pretty impressive. You're going to notice a lot of the teams on this list have given up more than that. Number 9, 1996 Green Bay Packers. 28.5 points per game, 13.1 points per game given up. So I actually got to see, this was the first Super Bowl I watched, was the Packers-Pats Super Bowl that year. And I was so young that I was rooting for the Patriots because I felt bad. My dad and I had gone to a Tampa Bay Lightning game, and it was against the Red Wings. And that was back in like the Yzerman, Shanahan Red Wings era. Oh my God, they were so good. But I was rooting for the Red Wings because I was a kid and I liked the color red more than I liked the color white, which the Lightning were wearing. Well, this Super Bowl came and I was like, you know what? My dad really wanted me to root for the white team, so I'm going to root for the Patriots because the Packers obviously had green and yellow and the Pats were wearing white. And then Green Bay absolutely smoked them. We're talking about Brett Favre. Oh, Brett Favre. He had himself a year. Well over 3,000 yards, close to 4,000, 39 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. Now, here was one thing that did surprise me. I actually thought Dorsey Levens was the main running back here. It was a man named Edgar Bennett. Didn't actually have a whole massive contributing factor because this team threw the ball. Antonio Freeman was a receiver on this team. He ended up really not having an incredibly impressive amount of touchdowns. He only had 4 and actually only even accumulated 90 or 900 yards, a little bit more. However, Brett Favre was somebody that would sling it to whoever he could sling it to. So I will take that into perspective because Antonio Freeman was a very good receiver. You might remember a name on defense, Reggie White. He only had 8.5 sacks that year, but this is coming to the, kind of the end of Reggie White. And Leroy Butler, now Hall of Famer, 6.5 sacks, 5 interceptions. One thing that I didn't realize till I actually went back and looked this up on tape after, I didn't remember Leroy Butler coming off the edge that much. But there he was, 6.5 sacks. I was like, holy shit. I didn't know that he had that in him. Number 8, 1971 Dallas Cowboys, 29 points per game, 15.9 points allowed. So I was a little reluctant to go with a 70s Cowboys team because personally, I think of Roger Staubach as a very good quarterback when you look at all time. And those Cowboys teams were really good. But I never thought of them as incredibly exciting. But this particular season, you got to keep in mind, 1971, and we're talking about 29 points per game. That's back in an era when most games were like 14-10, 17-13. Like, you didn't have a lot of games that teams were scoring close to 30 points, and the Cowboys at that era were doing it regularly. Now, when you look at the actual stats, Roger Staubach threw for under 2,000 yards. He had 1882, 15 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions. So the ratio is solid. It's pretty good. It's about 4-1, but obviously not a whole ton of running. They had Lance Allworth and Bob Hayes catching those balls. Not incredibly impressive stats. I didn't even take the time to write them down because, again, it's just going to make them look bad. But again, this is a team that was scoring 29 points per game in an era when that was not happening. Formidable defender, Bob Lilly. I'm pretty confident he's in the Hall of Fame. We're going to move on. We talked a pretty good bit about this team already, so I'm not going to bore you too much with talking about it again. But number 7, the 1999 St. Louis Rams, 32.9 points per game, allowing 15.1 points per game. So out of what I mentioned there, so I just want to go over some of the numbers. Kurt Warner threw for 4,300 yards, 41 touchdowns, which at the time hadn't been done, I think, since Dan Marino, and 13 interceptions. Marshall Faulk had a little over, close to 1,400 yards, 7 touchdowns, and I didn't even write his receiving stats. Grant Winstrom was somebody on that defense. London Fletcher. For those of you who remember London Fletcher, I did not remember that he was part of this defense. London Fletcher was on the roster. Granted, I don't even know if he was a starter on this team. I looked through the roster because I seem to remember playing a game of Madden in the past, and I played as the 99 Rams. And I remembered that there were guys that were on their defense that I didn't know at the time and then ended up being really good players. So London Fletcher was on that team, as I mentioned. Grant Widstrom, who was kind of a monster at defensive end for a little while in the NFL. He played in a few places too. Did he end up spending time in Seattle? I got that in my head, but I think I might be also thinking of Patrick Kearney because I know he was a Seahawk. Puppies are dreaming. I don't know if you can hear them. They're chasing something in their dreams. This is how fun the show is, huh? I put you guys to sleep. Is this like me telling you a bedtime story? Talking about one of the most exciting offenses of all time. Also, Dre Bly was a part of that defense. For those of you Lions fans out there, that great corner you had, he was on this team as well. And obviously, I have to at least mention that Orlando Pace, left tackle of that team, one of the greatest left tackles of all time. Number 6, the 1994 San Francisco 49ers, 31.6 points per game, 18.5 against. Steve Young takes over. Granted, he had been there for a few years at this point, had taken over, but this was the prime year for Steve Young. Just under 4,000 yards, 39.69, 35 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, which is very good, especially for that era. Ricky Watters running the ball. For those of you who remember Ricky Watters, I know my Seahawk fans out there will. He ran for 877 yards and 6 touchdowns. Obviously, Jerry Rice is a part of this roster. And anytime Jerry Rice is a part of your roster, you're going to see stuff like this. 112 catches, 1,499 yards. If he could have just broken that 1,500 plane. God, break a record. 13 touchdowns. And Deion Sanders had 6 interceptions. So Steve Young, as I mentioned to you last week, is probably the most underrated quarterback of all time. Steve Young was Russell Wilson before Russell Wilson. And honestly, I don't know that I'd say that he was not better than Russell Wilson. Now, his stats are going to occasionally at his peaks probably jump a little bit more than Russ's, just because, again, he was bolstered by just an incredibly gifted offense across the board. Where, Russ, I'm sure if you just say, hey, best game, and you do it by that list, yeah, you'll probably find more Russ games in there. But if you do it by season, I think you'd find more Steve Young years than you would Russell Wilson. I think that Russell Wilson throws a much better deep ball than Steve did. Keep in mind, Steve Young is running the Bill Walsh West Coast offense at this point. So it was meant to be underneath. It was meant to find Jerry Rice, who, even though wasn't the fastest receiver by any means, not that he was slow, but he wasn't the fastest guy. For some reason, hitting Jerry Rice on a slant meant a touchdown for 70 yards. I will never understand it because I've seen Jerry Rice run. He ran very fast, but not top level fast. But there he was taking a slant and bringing it 70 yards. I'm like, were the rest of the receivers on this team like just left tackles? like how is he always just open to the end zone every time? Crazy to watch. Check him out though, because seriously, that's a fun team as well. A team that might bore you a little bit more, but has greatness in its name. The 1975 Pittsburgh Steelers at number 5. 26.6 points per game, 11.6 points given up per game. That is the era of the Steel Curtain. We're talking Terry Bradshaw at quarterback there, who had just over 2,000 yards, 18 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. So the ratio is Franco Harris was running the ball a little over 1,200 yards that season. Lynn Swann, leading receiver with 11 touchdowns. You guys will remember that Lynn Swann catch. If you don't think you remember it, you do. You've seen it a million times because the NFL puts it on all sorts of different stuff. Lynn Swann had a phenomenal catch in a Super Bowl that became immortal. And you see it pretty much every time that you watch like any big football game. And they start off and it's a tape and it's greatness. This is what we talk about when we talk about greatness. And then you just see a bunch of plays that everybody knows from all time. And one of them is the Lynn Swann catch. So the most important part of this team is the defense here. So there's 4 names that I want to go over because these are 4 names you need to know. You got Mean Joe Green. Granted, statistically, none of these guys really piled up anything that made me that impressed. But you got to just know the names because I'm telling you, these guys were all Hall of Famers. All 4 of these guys are in the Hall of Fame. Mean Joe Green, Jack Ham, Jack Lambert, and Mel Blount, who did have one impressive stat. He had 11 interceptions that year. Damn. That's a lot, especially in an era where nobody threw the football. 1975, outside of Dan Fouts and Roger Staubach, who was throwing it? I guess Bart Starr. I don't even know if he was still around. Johnny Unitas, was he still around? Broadway Joe, was he still around? I don't remember how long those guys played. I remember they were there in the late 60s and early 70s. I don't know if they were all still there by 75. Len Dawson, maybe? Oh, Fran Tarkenton. He was probably still kicking around. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was. So, I mean, I guess there were some quarterbacks throwing occasionally, but considering that nobody back then could throw a 2,000-yard season outside of Staubach and Staubach, Unitas, and oh my God, I'm blanking on it. We just talked about him. Bradshaw. This team. Outside of those guys, nobody was really throwing for even 2,000 yards. So 11 interceptions is damn impressive. And I got to think a lot of those are pressure interceptions as well, because if you ever watch that defense on tape, it was just after the quarterback every time they dropped back. But they had to occasionally drop back because every time they handed the ball off, Mean Joe Green was there to be Mean Joe Green. Just swallowed them up. Number 4, the 1984 San Francisco 49ers. 29.7 points per game and only allowing 14.2 points per game. And I actually had to look through because I thought I was going to pick a late 80s Niners team here. But as I looked through at what the actual stats were for all the teams, and I did this somewhat analytically because when you watch the tape, the first thing you see is Jerry Rice. And it's like, oh yeah, Jerry Rice. But Jerry Rice wasn't a part of this team, or if he wasn't somebody that was in a leading role. This was the Dwight Clark 49ers roster. So we had Joe Montana, threw for a little over 3,600 yards, 28 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. We had a pairing of running backs with Wendell Tyler and Roger Craig, who together rushed for over 1,000 yards, but not either individually. Roger Craig at this point, I think he was still kind of on his rise, if I'm not mistaken. I believe he was mostly a late 80s star. Dwight Clark and, Freddy Solomon was the other receiver. That was another one too. I had forgotten all about him. When I read the name, I was like, oh shit, Freddy. For those of you who watch 80s football on YouTube, that's a name you should know. He's a pretty good wideout, but he just seemed like he was always right spot, right time kind of guy. Just that guy that's always there when you need a guy. He was that guy. So yeah, once again, this is before Jerry Rice was there. And that was part of what impressed me is I was thinking to myself, I'm like, no. Montana didn't have better years without Jerry Rice. Oh, well, when you look at it, they didn't score 29.7 points per game. And I mean, the other part of this is the defense. Only giving up 14 a game is really good. And as I look through that defense, only one name I knew, Ronnie Lott, one of the best safeties of all time. Absolutely. But there was nobody else on that defense that I looked at and I was like, yeah, that guy. None of those names rang a bell to me. So I'm aware that they have a very good defense. And to those of you who might be listening to this and you're in your 50s, you might be screaming names at me. And I read through them. I'm just telling you that through the tape I've watched of them, let's be honest. When you're watching tape of a great old team, unless it was because of the defense that they won all their games, you're watching the offenses. Like you're watching this to watch Joe Montana. You're not watching to watch the defense. And anytime that they were on defense in any of the games I've watched them play, I'm just checking out what Ronnie Lott's doing. I'm like, you know what? What was his style? What was it that he did? What made him this level of crazy and obsessed with the game that he cuts off his own finger before it wasn't even a Super Bowl, right? Was it a NFC Championship game? He broke it. So because it was going to prohibit him from playing better, he just said, remove it. They took off like half his finger. It just crazy. Number 3, the 1972, and I will also say /73 Miami Dolphins, and I only say it that way. I'm going to talk about the 72 team, but anybody that was on that 72 team says that the 73 team was actually better. We talk about the 1972 Dolphins because they were the only team in NFL history to not lose a game throughout the entirety of the season. I believe they only lost one game in 73. I think that was the reason that most of the time that gets a little bit overlooked. And I think if you look statistically, they were actually more impressive in 73, but I got down what they did in 72 because that was the perfect season. 27.5 points per game. Keep in mind, again, this is 1972. That is a lot of points. Only allowed a little over 12 points a game. Very impressive. So this team, you might think that this was a Bob Greasy team. This was an Earl Morrall, or maybe he says a Morale. I think he says a Morrall. It looks like a Morrall. Throws it for just over 1,300 yards, 11 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Sounds incredibly underwhelming, right? Well, you got to keep in mind that they had Mercury Morris and Larry Csonka. They both were pretty damn good. 1,000 yards apiece. Yeah, they were good. So for those of you who don't remember those guys, now Mercury Morris is mostly known as the mouthpiece of that team because he's the one that when you see in NFL films and they go to all the old players like, oh, what was it like? Mercury Morris will just tell you, oh, we were better than you. He does it kind of like the what you might imagine T.O. would do it like. So Mercury Morris, that's what I mostly remember of him, even though I've seen plenty of tape on this team because obviously you get obsessed with a team that didn't lose a game in a season. I've seen plenty on this team. He didn't really look that impressive, but he did good. So, I mean, I can't really take that away from him. And Larry Csonka was the first real powerhouse running back in the NFL. He was technically the fullback, but he would take plenty of handoffs, and Larry Csonka would just run you over. I believe he had started his career before Franco Harris did, because Franco Harris was kind of the next fullback that really ran with the ball. At least as far as my memory goes, I'm pretty sure Paul Hornung was technically a halfback. I don't remember much beyond that, but Larry Csonka Definitely Hall of Famer. Definitely in the Hall of Fame of people that most look like a Sasquatch. He's probably one of the most intimidating looking people that's ever played in the NFL. He just looks like he's probably gonna eat you mostly and enjoy it. Like he's gonna take his time seasoning you while he does it. Number 2, the 1985 Chicago Bears. This is a team well known for its defense. 28.5 points per game, which I did not realize the offense was that prolific. 12.4 points against. Jim McMahon, 15 touchdowns, 11 picks. I didn't bother writing the yardage because I'm pretty sure it fell under 2,000. We had Walter Payton, 1,551 yards, 9 touchdowns. Obviously, for those of you who didn't get to watch Walter Payton, that's another guy where I will tell you, go ahead and YouTube it because Walter Payton's worth the watch. Sweetness. He can make you miss and can run you over. He was one of the most balanced running backs I've ever seen. I would actually say that probably the closest thing to him that I have seen since would be Adrian Peterson as far as their ability to do it all. But what I would say is different is I think Adrian Peterson had heavier top line speed and Walter Payton had better ability to actually make you miss. That's where I would say they differ. I would say that power wise, they were pretty comparable, maybe even give that edge to Peterson. But Walter Payton's ability to make you miss, very few people have had that. And even though Peterson had some of that, it was not what Walter Payton's ability was doing it. You might remember William the Refrigerator Perry. Well, he was a rookie that year. And if I'm not mistaken, that was the year that that would have been the year because I don't think they made another Super Bowl after this one. That was the year where he got the touchdown in the Super Bowl by taking a handoff as the big ass left tackle. They said, hey, we call him the fridge. Let's let him run into the end zone. And he did. Let's see. What else do I got on this team here? Richard Dent, Hall of Famer, 17 sacks. Well, no wonder this defense is so good. Oh, but that's right. Potentially the greatest middle linebacker of all time, Mike Singletary. I don't know if you guys ever got to watch any Mike Singletary stuff. And for those of you who just think of him as a coach for the Niners, you're please specifically to you guys go back and watch his film because he was so good. He was so good. It's hard to diagnose specifically what the job of a middle linebacker is play to play. You can tell obviously if they're blitzing that their job is to blitz. You can tell when it's a zone scheme defensively when they drop straight back into their zone. But beyond that, the responsibility of a middle linebacker shifts so much because you have to be reading the quarterback. Oftentimes you're considered a spy for the quarterback if he's going to be the one taking off to, even if it's not going to be you going to chase him, you have to be able to shout it out to your defense. You basically watch the quarterback, you watch the offense, you're watching the line to see how it moves because maybe this is a screenplay. If you notice that the entire offensive line shifts over, you got to start yelling screen, screen, screen. The middle linebacker is mostly responsible, especially in this era, for all of this stuff. And then additionally, you got to worry about your own pass coverage. You can't just let one of these receivers come right into your zone, run right past you, and then he's by himself. You got to be there covering all that. You have so many jobs as a middle linebacker. And Mike Singletary, the only person I would argue is in the same category as far as top of this list goes, would be Ray Lewis. I think it's Ray Lewis, Mike Singletary. And then after that, you can start talking about anybody else. You know, I personally think of guys like Patrick Willis, even though his career was cut a little bit short. You can definitely tell me, Jack Lambert, I'll listen. And I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. Absolutely a part of this. Oh God. After that, I mean, probably go to Brian Urlacher, Zach Thomas, Luke Kuechly, even Bobby Wagner. I think that all those guys start coming into the conversation, but the top notch, and honestly, I mean, I think I'd lean towards Ray Lewis, but it's close. It's close. Mike Singletary is right there. You got to watch him play if you haven't, because I'm telling you, it's the best thing you've ever seen. Time for a beer. Before number one, oh, am I going to piss you guys off right now? I'm going to piss you guys off so bad. And no, it's not because I'm going to do a Seahawk thing. It's because I'm picking a team that didn't even win the Super Bowl, but they were the best team I have ever seen. The 2007 New England Patriots. Holy shit, they were good. Guys, I am telling you, I know they lost that Super Bowl to the Giants. If they play that same game, let's just say everybody auto regenerates like you're doing it in Madden, and they play 365 times for 365 days in the year. I think the Pats win that 362 out of the 365. That was just one of the days that the Giants would have won. And I know it's a great story that the Giants won that. A lot of people love it, especially people that hate Brady, especially people that hate the Pats. Heck, frankly, I bet half the guys breaking down the tape are going to hate me for doing this. Number one is the 2007 New England Patriots, who averaged 36.8 points per game. They gave up 17.1. If I'm not mistaken, that is second on this list, second most on this list. And it didn't matter because they were going to score damn near 40 points a game, more than anybody else on this list, more than anybody else ever. These guys were crazy. Tom Brady threw for, oh, you know what? I didn't even write the stats. You know what I did? I wrote them in a separate area. Tom Brady threw for 4,800 yards, 50 touchdowns, which at the time broke a record, 8 interceptions. Look at that ratio, 50-8. They didn't even need running backs because they had wide receivers. They had Randy Moss, 98 catches, 1,493 yards, 23 touchdowns, still the record for today. Still, the only thing Jerry Rice doesn't have, Randy Moss took from him with Tom Brady. Wes Welker, 112 catches, 1,175 yards, 8 touchdowns. Let me just dive into this. I don't need the rest of the stats here. We got to talk a little bit there. Tom Brady, you'll look at his stats throughout the entirety of his career, and you're going to see this one thing on the chart that is just, what the hell is that? That was 2007. This team just outscored you. And when they were already winning the game by 30, they just outscored you by more. They didn't stop. They couldn't stop. It was, I believe, a combination running back system of Lawrence Maroney and Kevin Falk, I think it was. And the two of them, they were barely utilized. And because of it, I'm pretty sure they both averaged more than 4 yards a carry just because they maybe got the ball like 100 times throughout the course of the year. Because every play, you had the threat of Randy Moss taking it deep. And I remember game one that year, they played the Dolphins. Or was it the Jets? Oh, which one was it? Because both of them, they were both in the first 3 weeks. I said that so confidently, and now I'm not sure which one I'm thinking of. Either way, it happened in both games where they were like, ooh, how's this? Randy Moss, he's coming off a couple of bad years in Oakland. I don't know if he still has it. And you just see Tom Brady bombing it up to Randy Moss. I think he got 3 touchdowns in that first game. Oh, God, I can't remember if it was the Jets or the Dolphins. I know it was one of them. I got it in my head it was the Dolphins. I think they smoked the Jets like 2 weeks later by basically doing the same thing. I'm pretty sure I got this right. Either way, we're talking about Randy Bleepin' Moss, dude. Randy Moss is who I would argue is the best receiver to ever play this game. He just can't contribute the statistical pieces that Jerry Rice was able to put up. And that's the difference because Jerry Rice was able to do all this stuff. And granted, because of that, I have to pretty much relinquish the GOAT to Jerry Rice. I have to. You just can't argue with all those stats. But if you want to tell me who the best was ever, it's Randy Moss. It's Randy Moss, and then it's probably Calvin Johnson. Honestly. They just didn't have as long of a prime. I mean, Randy Moss had 2 primes that were very random, but they were great. Both of them. Phenomenal. His rookie year, I think he still holds like every rookie receiving record. He came in the late 90s. Wes Welker, this guy in Miami who's caught 1 touchdown his whole career. What's he going to do? Oh, he's going to start a whole new system of Brady. that's going to become his run game. He's just going to dump it off to Wes Welker. And Wes Welker's so quick. He's not incredibly fast, but he's really quick. And he's going to turn those 3-yard catches into 7-yard catches. And guess what? When we just need to pick up 6, okay, Wes Welker, go get it. First down, Wes Welker, go get us 6. And we get 2nd and 4 instead of 2nd and 10. Done. They had Dante Stallworth. Dante Stallworth, you might remember, very good on the New Orleans Saints back in the day with Aaron Brooks. That was back with Joe Horn and Jerome Payton. That was one of their guys, Dante Stallworth. He came over and kind of filled the number 2 role, if you will, for receiver in New England, because Randy Moss was on one end and they ran a 3 receiver system. Dante Stallworth would be on the other end, and then you had Wes Welker in there. I know they had Jabbar Gaffney was in there too, making catches. I feel like I know a 5th guy in there as well. I actually think that Gaffney might have been the 5th guy. And I know Ben Watson was the tight end. Ben Watson had a hell of a year. I think if you look at his career stats, that was probably his best year as well. I think he had like 11 touchdowns or some shit like that. Defensively, it was guys that you remember from some of those older teams. There was Mike Vrabel and Teddy Bruschi. Junior Seau, I believe, was part of that team as well. And Asante Samuel was this just ball hawking corner at that time. Asante Samuel, I don't know that he was necessarily, I would not call him a lockdown guy, but he would come away with a ton of picks. It was kind of like, I'm blanking on his name right now. The kid that's on the Cowboys that just had his rookie year and did awesome. I'm totally blanking on that kid. I'm not going to sit here and try to think of it, but that reminds me a lot of Asante Samuel. Asante Samuel would give up a whole bunch of big catches and then would go get you a pick 6. Never knew which one you were getting, but you were getting one of them. Funnest team I've ever watched in football. I don't care what anybody tells me. I don't care how much all of you hate me for me doing this. Number 1 best team in NFL history, in my mind, 2007, New England Patriots. If you want to get pissed off next week, come back and check me out, because I'm probably going to talk about something else to piss you off. We're getting closer and closer, man. I don't know what next week's going to be yet. I didn't map it out, or I think I have it mapped out, but it's not in front of me. I think we're still too far away for playoff predictions. I know we're too far away for power rankings. Oh, the 2 weeks leading up to football, I'm going to bombard you with all new football stuff, by the way. I know I'm doing these all-time things. I'm doing what everybody does in July, now in August, because this is the way you got to do football, baby. For any of you that want to check me out on Jacked and Canned, head over there. You get to watch me have a lot of fun with my buddy John. A little bit less sports, a little bit more probably talking about dog sitting, honestly. Probably a lot more of that. And obviously, check out the guys at Breaking Down the Tape. Check out all the affiliations of Breaking Down the Tape. Join me next week for Nobody Is Shiftier.